Alright, I am back with a combo video based on the Sony State of Play showcase yesterday, which had 14 games in 30 minutes, except one of those games got 10 minutes. That would be Concord from Firewalk, which is a studio that Sony acquired a year ago, I think. This is one of their many live service multiplayer things that they want to do, and it is a 5v5 hero shooter. I wrote about how it was not really well received, with everyone saying it looked pretty generic. The YouTube trailers are downvoted quite a bit. But there was also something interesting that people pointed out here, and that was how similar a bunch of different elements in it were to Destiny. And the reason this is like a little bit eye-catching is because the design director of Firewalk, and therefore this game, is Josh Hamrick, who was formerly a big kind of Bungie sandbox guy before he left to be with Firewalk. And I'm not accusing him of like ripping things off or whatever, but like there is a lot of shared DNA here, and I do wonder if kind of the idea was to combine a lot of elements of Destiny's classes and Crucible with the hero shooter idea. And then, of course, this kind of feeds into a third game, Bungie's own Marathon, which we learned recently, even though it's like a team-based extraction game, because the old Valorant? Everyone always makes fun of me. I forget which one's the real one. We'll go with Valorant. Is now the director of Marathon, replacing Chris Barrett in an extremely weird series of events we still don't understand. And the rumor when that happened 9 months ago or whatever it was that the game had shifted from custom player characters, more along the lines of like your Helldivers, to heroes. And Valorant has heroes, and then this game's gonna have heroes, and it's Bungie, and they have the same shooting. And then Concord is by ex-Bungie people, and it has some elements. Not just some, a good amount. So I just went back and rewatched the cinematic trailer and the gameplay trailer to kind of find some of these, because like a few were mentioned here and there. I'll say up front that Bungie does not own the copyright to all of these moves. It's just the fact that you can see so many of them in 1 2-minute gameplay trailer that it makes you wonder at least a little bit how this might translate to the rest of the game, what other stuff might be in there from other character kits, and all these hero games have abilities and whatever, but like there was a lot here seemingly from Destiny as opposed to like Overwatch or something. It seems less directly, even this was accused of being an Overwatch clone, the stuff here is from Destiny in a few instances at least. Okay. This is kind of in order of the gameplay trailer. I'll be playing it to some degree here, just as you can see as you go, but there is a tripwire grenade thrown pretty close to the start. You could also interpret it as maybe a lightning grenade where it sticks to the side and blows up. Functions mostly like a tripwire grenade. There is an explosive throwing knife thrown by the gunslinger character. There is an air dodge, and there is a flying fire person who is like flaming around, and I think they can do an air dodge. I think maybe a couple people can do an air dodge. The flying fire person also has kind of a throwable solar grenade that AoEs an area with fire in a way that does resemble the regular solar grenade a bit, and it also feels a bit like the Warlock fire snap in some ways, with the way it kind of lobs toward people. And then we wrap it up with some Titan adjacent things. There was an aerial ground slam where like you leap up in the air, you have a little targeting thing on the ground, and then you slam down into the person. There's something that looks like it's either like a shoulder charge or like a quick dodge, which again, not copyrighted by Bungie, but still. And then there's one I saw in the cinematic trailer that looks to be something somewhat akin to a Titan barricade, where a blue shield is thrown up. Again, that's somewhat common. I couldn't tell if it's a portable shield or if it's a fixed barricade shield, but 1 or 2 of these, okay, but like there's a lot of these that combine together that can be seen in such a short period of time. So it does feel to me like this is trying to use at least some Destiny DNA for a hero shooter. and it does not really have the rest of the aesthetic of Destiny. It is very much, I would say, Overwatch mixed with maybe a little bit of Apex, and then a lot of Guardians of the Galaxy. In terms of its like aliens and robots and quote sense of humor that you can see mainly in the cinematic trailer. This is also a game that said they're going to do weekly story updates with some sort of cutscene every time you log in to like further the story of the PvP shooter, which I feel like that's not really what people are signing up for, especially when there was no actual PvE content in this that we know about. And then this circles back to Marathon, and it makes me wonder both how Marathon will be received. It's a real gamble how your hero shooter is going to be received these days. This is probably on the really bad side of how I've seen one of these games received. Conversely, you can have some exceptions like Marvel Rivals. I talked about this, where this is literally an Overwatch clone to the point of like a lawsuit. Like so much about it feels just ripped directly from Overwatch, from like the UI to level design to like a lot of stuff. However, it is very attractive because it has these like really cool stylized versions of Marvel characters, and it's a third-person shooter, not a first-person shooter. And sometimes you're not shooting, you're just throwing webs or magic or whatever at people. And so that has been a lot better received despite being an Overwatch ripoff hero shooter. And then, you know, in recent years, we have games that have been a success in this genre. Valorant, Apex, like these are hero shooter games that have not been completely dismissed out of hand. Marathon, I feel like, is really going to have to do two main things. It has to have some of the best Bungie gunplay we have ever seen. It has to live up to the traditional standards of like top-notch industry best Bungie gunplay. I think they can do that because at default, like that is their system. If they are using something very similar to that, then it should, really feel the same way in a lot of ways. I don't know if this is confirmed. I have to believe this is a first-person shooter. It would be insane if it was not a first-person shooter. And then secondly, I think it really has to stand out in terms of aesthetic, not just aesthetic design, but aesthetic / mission design. We know it's an extraction game, so it's not a 5v5 arena shooter. So at baseline, that is setting it apart a bit, even if it does have a hero concept with, preset kits and stuff that people are predisposed to sort of hate at this point. The structure of the game, the way it functions, how, supposedly it's not really like Tarkov either, so it sort of feels like it's trying to blaze its own trail, which I think is good, because if you debut this and it does not look like a 5v5 hero shooter, that is going to make it a lot more well received. I think the aesthetics are very important too. I think that's discounted a little bit. One of the biggest pushbacks to Concord here is that it looks quote unquote soulless. It looks like, pretty generic in terms of like space scoundrels, but not from any IP we know. Like, I appreciate games trying to make new IPs and be innovative, but it also feels like we've seen a bunch of these where it's just, here's these, different archetypes of characters, like ever since Overwatch. This feels like a game that was conceived of when Overwatch launched and was a big hit, but since games take a long time to make, it's been 5 years, and suddenly this doesn't seem so fresh anymore, and it has to stand alone essentially entirely on gameplay, which better be awesome and grabbing. In terms of Marathon, if you are going to go the shooter route, I really think they need to lean heavily into the aesthetic that we saw from the trailer. It is really cool. It is unlike a lot of stuff that we see anywhere else, and yet we know over time things can change pretty dramatically in terms of design. Everything about that initial reveal screamed Chris Barrett to me, both in terms of his past concept designs for things like Destiny, like the kind of art he does, the art he's into. Like if you follow him on Twitter, he retweets a lot of like really, really trippy, cool art, and it felt like his direction. So I'm wondering if he was replaced essentially a month after the big showcase where it debuted for as of yet unknown reasons. And the Valorant guy took over. Who knows how that might change? Like maybe he's not a design guy, maybe they're keeping the aesthetic, but if you're doing heroes, you better make them stand the hell out from this increasingly crowded landscape, and a lot of things that do come off as pretty generic. I am not optimistic about Concord based on what we've seen here. Again, everyone could be wrong, but this debuts in August, so it's like 3 months away, 2 months away at this point. So what you see is sort of what you get. There's a beta in July, so it's essentially imminent. This is not always the case. Things can be, better than they look. I do feel like sometimes first impressions are accurate. I'm thinking back to Suicide Squad, where in the big gameplay reveal showcase, people were like, that's what this is? This looks pretty weird. And then, like, essentially both the concept and the look of Suicide Squad was sort of derided from the start. Like, why are they making this game? They should make this other type of game. And the only real positive press Suicide Squad got was during the alpha, where, like, you do play it. It was kind of fun to play. The gameplay is kind of fun, admittedly, but the impression of, like, this is what this game is. It wasn't a, multiplayer shooter PvP, but, like, okay, this is what this is. This does not look great. This does not look like something I want to play. Sure enough, that led to being a enormous bomb. It was a much higher profile game than this, but I do wonder, if first impressions here can be accurate, even just based on footage and, like, not necessarily getting your hands on it, whatever. But yeah, and I don't think, with all these Destiny elements in it, I don't think a lot of Destiny players are predisposed to want to hop over to some 5v5 hero shooter. I think Marathon could be different. It's literal Bungie. It is not a 5v5 hero shooter, even if there are hero elements in it. I don't know if Destiny players will leap right over to that either, but I think it's a little different of a situation. So I'm not going to write it off. Like, you never know how something's going to be until it's played, until it's out in the wild, until you get your hands on it yourself and you can see how it functions. If it's the most tight, fun, enjoyable hero shooter ever, then great. But I do understand, like, I recognize that it is a fact that most people seem to have a poor first impression of this, and I personally have a poor first impression of this. I don't really care about the Destiny powers. Again, I don't think Bungie has a copyright for that stuff. It is just sort of funny that Josh Hamrick is the director over there, and it does have all of these elements. I think Destiny PvP can be really good, so I get why you would maybe want to take some of those elements and instead of just aping everything Overwatch is doing. So, I can see the pathway there, but it is kind of funny to watch this trailer and just see them all laid out in a row. But yeah, those are my thoughts. It's a bit of a jumble, but I thought it's kind of an interesting scenario that spans these three different games that are sort of adjacent to my beat here. So yeah, let me know what you think of Concord. Curious how other people are reacting to it in my own feed here as opposed to just the general public. But yeah, anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you soon. Take care.